Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to my tutorial on installing MySQL Server Community Edition and MySQL Workbench on Windows 10. I'm recording this in just the beginning of the summer semester 2019, early May. And I'm going to be using the most up-to-date version of the Windows operating system. I just got that updated today. We're using a virtual machine because I work on a Mac. And also, we're going to be using the most up-to-date version of the MySQL software when we install it. Okay, so if you do the video, if you play the video in about a week, which I'm anticipating my students will in the current semester, everything's probably going to look exactly like it looks on the tutorial, and the versions of things that you're going to use are going to be the same. I'd like these installation tutorials to have a little bit longer life though. So what I recommend is whenever you're doing the installation, make sure you have your operating system up to date. And when we start to download the MySQL software, unless I've warned you off it in the class, uh, install the most up-to-date version that they have. Okay, so we're always going to be using the newest one unless somebody's actually discovered some kind of a fault in the newest release, in which case we'll warn you off in class. So let's get started. I'm going to use the Edge browser because it's the Microsoft one. It's not really the one that I prefer. And I'm just going to do a search for um, MySQL. Okay. And looks like it used Bing, which is okay. So here's the MySQL site. Let's go to that. And there's a link for downloads. Let's go to that. Okay. Now, um, it turns out there's several editions, and we want to get the free community edition, and that's all the way down at the bottom of the page. So we go all the way down to the bottom, MySQL Community Edition, and we click on the link that says Community GPL Downloads, and we go there. Okay, and then we have a list of products. Okay, and you can install them individually, but it's going to turn out that the installer that we're going to use is going to install all the MySQL products that we're going to need in one fell swoop. So that's going to be nice. How do we find our way? Well, under MySQL Community Server, let's click on Download. Okay, let's go down here a bit. And the installer that we want to use is this one. We come down here to a list of installers, but there's one that says MySQL Installer MSI, and these MSI installers are classic Windows installers. So we have to go to another download page for that. So we're going to click on this button, go to download page. And then we go over there. And this is where you have to pick the version of the MSI installer that we want to use. They're both 32-bit, so whether you have a 64-bit operating system or 32, you can really use either one. I pick the one that's smaller. It downloads more of the software during installation. Okay, so I'm just going to take this one. It's the top one, and I'm going to click download. And what happens is you get asked whether or not you would like to sign up for an Oracle web account. Now, I've had one for years. So I think it's a good thing to sign up for. And if you want to, you can do it. This would be okay time to do it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the link. No thanks, just start my download. Because they already know who I am for a long time. Okay, and now down at the bottom of the browser, I can run it or save it. I'm going to do a save. Okay, and it runs a security scan as it downloads. It's not too big of a download, and I've got a pretty fast connection here. So that looks okay. And now we're going to click on the button for view downloads. And I don't really like that version of the download, so I'm just going to try to get rid of that. I'm going to hit escape, and it's going to go away. And I have everything I want to download for right now. Okay, so I'm going to close the browser, and I'm going to go down. And what I've done is I've taken the File Explorer and I've pinned it to my taskbar. Now, how did I do that? Well, I did that by going over to the Start icon, winding all the way down the list of things till I get to Windows System all the way down at the bottom. Okay. And File Explorer is in here. And instead of starting it, what I did was I right-clicked and I clicked on More, and I went over here, and there was a link for Pin to Taskbar. Now, I'm not going to unpin it now, but that's how I got that there. Okay. So I'm going to go down to the taskbar, click on File Explorer, and it opens up. And I want to click on the downloads directory, which is over here in the list of directories. So here's downloads, and here is the installer. Now, there once was a time when you needed to run the installer as an admin user, okay? Most of us are admin users on our personal computers. So it turns out that my experience is that just running the installer by double clicking it in the File Explorer runs it just fine. Okay, so you don't have to worry about, at least I didn't have to worry about running it in a special administrator mode. So I'm just going to double click and wait for the installer to begin to run. And I have to say yes, it can run. It starts to copy things. Okay, and yeah, we can do the installer launcher. No problem there. Now we're waiting for it to come up. So you can see the installer. It's coming along, and now it wants us to accept the license agreement. So I'm going to check the box and click on Next. Now, in the old days, I used to take the developer's default. Unfortunately, that installs a lot more software than I want. So we're going to do a custom install. So it's the radio button at the bottom, custom, click on that, and then click on the next button. And now we're going to have to pick the software that we want. Okay, and we're going to want one server, one application, and some documentation related stuff. So how do we get the server? Well, there's a little plus icon. We'll click on that. and MySQL server, click on that. MySQL server 8, click on that. And it's showing me a 64-bit version. I think the reason it's showing me a 64-bit version is that that's the kind of operating system I have and it knows it. Okay, so I highlight that and then there are these three arrows in the middle. I'm going to click on the top one and it goes over in the list of things to be installed. Okay, so now, so that's the server. All right, let's close that up. Let's find the application that we want. Okay, so the application that we want is called MySQL Workbench. And you may have noticed already that I use MySQL and MySQL sort of interchangeably. And I would say that people do that. And I, no one of those two options is more correct than the other. So if I seem to be alternating, I apologize, but that's just what happens. So we're up to version 8, and I'm going to click on the plus again. And that looks like it's the 64-bit version. Again, since that's the operating system I have, that makes sense. So I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to click the top arrow. So now we're going to get server and workbench. That's good. In my class, we do not use the MySQL connectors. Okay, what would those be? Well, there's essentially one for a number of different programming languages. There's one more general one. We're not going to be using it with the programming language in the course that I'm going to be doing. So we're not going to take any of the MySQL connectors, but we are going to take the documentation stuff. Let's open MySQL documentation, open version 8, highlight the lowest level 1, click on the right arrow. Now we have the documentation. And then the other thing that we want is samples and examples. This is going to give us the databases that come with MySQL. They're not things that that are talked about in our textbook, but we might want to play with them sometime during our course. So they're kind of nice to have if they're easily installed. So click on the plus to open up samples and examples, and then the plus again. And now we've got the lowest level 1. Right now it's samples and examples 8.0.16. And highlight that, hit the upper arrow. And now these four things, MySQL Server, MySQL Workbench, MySQL Documentation, and samples and examples, that's all that we want to get installed. Okay, so now we can go down to the bottom and click on the next button. Okay, so we're going to want to install these four things. Okay, one of them, Workbench, has a precursor that has to be installed first. It's the runtime for Microsoft's Visual C++. Okay, now we don't see an option to do that, but having selected these four, as soon as we start to execute, it's going to tell us that one of these has a precursor that we have to install first. So let's click on execute. Well, you can see it's doing the downloading. It hasn't discovered the exact problem that I'm looking for yet. Well, let's see. We still have some downloading going on. And some more downloading going on. Okay, so you can see that the server is installing. The server doesn't have a precursor. Okay, it can run absolutely fine without Visual C++ runtime. So that should do a pretty good job of installing all by itself. Okay, you can see the samples and examples look like they've already installed. Um, and that's good. Okay, so we have two complete, we have two errors. Okay, so let's go to the try again link on the the link for Workbench. And I have a hard time here. Sometimes I have to go over and double click on these in order to really get them going. Not having a lot of luck there. All right, let me highlight this and say show details. No, that's not it. We're going to hide those details. Okay, so let's highlight this again. Let's double click it. Double click the try again. What a frustrating experience this is. Okay, I just did this about a half hour ago and it behaved differently. Don't you love that? Okay, I'm going to put you guys on pause until I figure it out. So here we are, we're back. And one of the things I did, I'm working on a virtual machine. Okay, so sometimes exactly what I point to on the screen is a little different from what you might get. But so I was having a hard time clicking on these try again um, links. And what I did is I clicked a little bit to the left of them. I double clicked on progress and Workbench began to load. So we're getting some progress here. Let's just kind of watch this. We're getting pretty high. So we're installing Workbench. Again, we still don't have the precursor for it, which is this uh, Visual Studio runtime. Perhaps it's the Visual Basic runtime. It's one of the runtimes that you can get for free. Okay. A watch pot never boils. Okay, I'm going to put you guys on pause until we get another message. So, here we are, we're back, and Workbench just went all the way to complete, so that looks pretty good. And let's look at the documentation. And again, I'm just going to click. I'd love to click. Yeah, I clicked on the try again for Workbench, and I got it to start installing the documentation. Okay, so we've got all four of these are complete right now. We haven't got the opportunity to install the precursor, but we will if I remember right. So this is about as good as this is. Now, um, you, if you're using Windows 10, are probably not using a virtual machine. So I think you're clicking on these try again and progress areas will be a little easier than what I showed you it was for me. Okay, let's click on the next button. And you say you can cancel any point. Samples and examples. Okay, let's try to do some configuration. Okay, so we still haven't been asked for that one thing, which is kind of driving me nuts. So if you happen to be going through this and you get asked to install the Visual C++ runtime, just install it. Okay, it's free. Um, you'll probably only be asked if you don't have it already installed on your machine. And there's a little sub dialog that comes up, and you follow the instructions and say yes, yes, yes. Install, unzip, and there you go. Okay. Okay, so of this, in the configuring of the server, we've got two choices. One is a standalone server. The other is a cluster, an InnoDB cluster. The default is standalone. We're going to leave it there. So let's click on next. Okay. And let's see, I like the defaults that you get for the name of the server and the port that it works on and all this kind of stuff. This is all good stuff. So on this page, type in networking. We're going to take the defaults and just click on next. Okay. The authentication method, the default is to use this strong password encryption for authentication. They recommend it. A year ago, we were having a hard time with that. Now, seems to be behaving quite well. So we're just going to leave that as is and click on the next button. Okay. And they're asking us for a password. Now, this is a copy of the server that's going to run on your laptop or your desktop machine. Nobody's going to be able to get to it unless they have the password to log on to your machine. So what we want is a convenient to remember password. That's helpful when we're doing this. Well, we're kind of being a developer and we're working on our own machine. If this were a production server, that would be a pretty bad idea. I mean, we would want a very hard to guess password. Now, the one that Marak recommends in his textbook is Sesame, as in Open Sesame, an old, I guess, a fairy tale, sort of an old story. So Sesame is S-E-S-A-M-E, Sesame, and then S-E-S-A-M-E. You want something that you're definitely not going to forget. It says it's weak, which is just what we want in this particular case. Are we going to create any users? No, in this class, we're going to have administrator privileges. It turns out that that's kind of easy for a lot of the tasks that we're going to be doing. So we're not going to add any users. And now let's click on the next button. And let's see, it's going to create a Windows service called MySQL 80. It's going to get it to start the service when you boot up your system. That sounds like a good idea. It's going to run on a standard system account. I think that's a good idea too. So all the defaults on this page, click on next. And sometimes these can be confusing. This is kind of a checklist of things that it's going to do. So I'm going to click on execute and it's going to go through the checklist. So here you go. I clicked on it and on my machine, these things don't take a very long time. Got a pretty fast laptop. And now I'm going to click on finish. And now it wants me to do some more configuration. the samples and examples are ready to configure, so let's click on Next. And now it wants me just to connect. So it wants me to test the connection to the server. So the username that we're using is root. That is the admin password. And we set up the password. I'm sorry. The username root is the admin username. And then the password we set up is Sesame, S-E-S-A-M-E. So let's give that a check. And the connection succeeded. That's good. Let's click on Next. Okay. Okay, so now it's going to check if we need any other configuration and run some scripts. So let's go down and click on Execute. And that looks okay. So now we're down at the end. Let's click the Finish button. Okay. Now we're back to the product configuration page. Let's just click the Next button again. It wants to know if you want to start MySQL Workbench after the setup. Well, yeah, we do. So let's click on Finish. Okay, and we'll see how that goes. There's Workbench. Okay, so the server is the server. This is a client server application. So the server that we installed, that's the server part. Okay. Workbench is a MySQL client. It's a free one. It's very functional. And using it is an alternative to working at the command line, right? There's a command line client for MySQL, which has been around forever and has lots of functionality, but of course you have to remember all the commands. And we are going to use Workbench, which is has a graphical user interface. So the installer automatically installed it for us. That's great. Okay. But how would we normally start it? Well, let's close it and the rest of the windows that we have. And let's go over to the lower left to the Start button. Okay. And these are MySQL. Okay. So if we go down alphabetically, there's a menu, there's a folder of MySQL programs that we can run. Okay. And the one that we're the most interested in is this MySQL Workbench 8.0 CE. And again, I don't want to go hunting for them all the time. So what I want to do is I want to add that to my taskbar. So I'm going to, while I'm over it, I'm going to right click and I'm going to go, I'm not pin to start, but I'm going to the taskbar. So hover over more and then pick pin to taskbar. And now you can see down here we have this little blue dolphin. We have a blue button with a white dolphin line drawing on it. And that's the icon for Workbench. Okay, so let's just fire up Workbench and make sure that works. Looks like it does. Okay, and let's put it through its paces a little bit. We'll be learning how to use Workbench in our next activity a little bit more. But let's, one of the things that you need to work with your server is you need to connect to it. And when we did the install, it automatically created a connection to local instance MySQL 80. Okay. And we're going to click on that to open it. And it's going to want to know what the password is. That's our old Sesame, SESAME. And I'm going to click the box, check the box that says to save it in the password vault. And then OK. And here we go. So this is Workbench. So we're going to be learning a whole lot about Workbench. Chapter 2 of the Maroc book is a tour of Workbench. Okay. And so the lecture has some of that tour in it as well. Okay, so what could we do? Well, um, we can't really do much at all because we need to find some databases. Oh, well, let's look here. This is a classic kind of a layout. There's a navigator panel. Okay, so this is a place where you kind of switch from mode to mode. There's an editor panel. It's a little small right now, so we're going to pull it here. When we open like a script, we're going to open it in the editor panel. And then there's kind of a helper panel over here to the right. And it does a lot of interesting stuff. We're not going to be working with it a whole lot, but we'll talk about it in chapter 2. Okay, so if you look at where we are in this navigator panel, we're on the administration tab. Let's come over here to the right and click on the schemas tab. Okay, so in MySQL, the term schema and the term database is used fairly, those two terms are used fairly interchangeably. Okay, so when we said that we wanted to install the examples, it installed 3 databases: Sequila, Sys, World. Actually, I think Sys is probably probably some kind of internal configuration to a table. So the 2 example databases are Sequila and World. And if we open Sequila, which we do by clicking on the little triangle to open it, okay, you can see that we've got tables, viewed, stored procedures, and functions. We're going to be working with tables, so we're going to open up the triangle on that. And these are all the tables, okay? The easiest thing that you can do is you can come down over these table names and pick one. So let's pick customer. Then off to the right, you have 3 icons, and the first one we're going to learn how to do is the one all the way on the right. It's the one that looks like a grid. So if we click on that, that's going to show us the data in that table. Okay, so how does it do it? Well, it creates a query that asks for all the data in that table. But now down here in the bottom, we can see that there are a bunch of customers, and they're right here. Okay, there you go. It's quite a few customers there. So I would say that we have this installed. I would say that we're able to access the databases. We have a lot more to learn about MySQL, a lot more to learn about Workbench, a lot more to learn about queries and all that kind of stuff. But we've been able to show ourselves that we have the product installed and everything's going fine. So if you want to close a connection, this is a tab right here for it. You could close it by clicking the X, and now you get up to the top. And if you want to close Workbench, you just go to the upper right and click the X. And there you go. So we've got the database installed, and we've got the we've got the Workbench installed, and it's really the bulk of what we're going to use. Okay. All right. Good. Um, that's it for now. You're ready to move on to the next tutorial where we load the files that came with our textbook. Okay, so I'm going to say bye now, and I'll see you in that one in a few minutes. Bye for now.